do you want questions from people that have responded earlier? I mean, I have a question from Diane asking, who inspired you, basically? Who inspired you to begin writing? Or
it's difficult to pinpoint. I don't think there was one particular person. I suppose it might possibly be H.G. Wells in a roundabout type of way.
Right.
When I first started writing, it was the very first thing I remember writing creatively outside the realms of what you had to do at school. It was I did my own version of War of the Worlds.
Right.
At the time, I was really enjoying watching the old 1950s movie.
Right.
So I was big into watching that, and then I found out that there was also a musical version of it, which that was completely new to us as well. That was like music and storytelling all together.
Yeah.
So that was really something that made us. I took the basic premise of War of the Worlds, and I kind of rewrote it, as you do when you're a kid and at school. You write your stories, which is like, me and my friends did this and me and my friends did that. So I kind of took the premise of War of the Worlds, the aliens invading, and built it around the place that I lived with the people that I knew, which was that was like the main focal point. So although it wasn't based, the inspiration wasn't off his book. I didn't read his book until I didn't actually read the book of War of the Worlds until about 10 years ago or something like that. It was the film based on the book, which obviously he wrote the book.
Yeah.
The inspiration behind us putting stubby little pencil to horribly crappy, shitty exercise books and writing along my own version of what happens.
No, I mean, that's actually quite interesting because English was one of the subjects that one of the very few subjects I excelled at school, and creative writing was my forte. Mm-hmm. And I would often get work returned for being too graphic and too descriptive. Yeah. Probably because of my very early exposure to horror films and video nasties before they got banned.
Yeah.
And it's something that I kind of wish that I'd taken up, creative writing, but it's just something that never actually materialized and probably never will. Nowadays I'm just a reader, but I appreciate the effort that goes into creative writing, mm-hmm. Because I know it's not just a case of writing down a few ideas.
Yeah.
But, I've got a question from Leah, which is similar to the first question, actually. Why did you start writing? I guess the two questions kind of tie in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why I started to write, I think it was just, I suppose it was the ability to actually tell a story, because obviously, like I said before, I did start when I was very young. I think I was about 8 years old when I first.
Yeah.
That's when I started Ben Black's version of War of the Worlds, or Invasion of Blythe in the northeast of England, I suppose, as it was.
Yeah.
But that was as a child. You don't have a great deal of control over what you do. You always have to do what the adults tell you to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So I suppose the creative writing aspect it was the fact that there was the world that I was in control of, that I could actually make things happen or make things not happen. However terribly contrived and poorly written it was as an 8-year-old, that was kind of the process about why I wanted to start doing what I did, I suppose. And I was always different to other kids as well. Like I say, I started when I was young in first school. There was a lot of other kids who were always all into their football and things like that. And
Yeah.
I'm not a sporty type of guy. I'm not followed the football or rugby or golf, tennis, anything like that. So I suppose I just had my own little niche, I suppose, to carve into and define who I was through what I did at that age, and it just came as storytelling.
No, I mean, I can relate to that. I mean, I was also a very early reader myself, and I grew up reading my dad's Stephen King, James Herbert, Dennis Wheatley horror books. I voraciously read everything, every book that was in the house, dictionaries, encyclopedias, anything and everything. And for me, it was perfect escapism. And no, so I can totally get that. And I mean, it's thanks to people like you that people like me can actually have books to read and have a bit of escapism from the real world. Although the real world is kind of almost mirroring some of the stuff that we used to read about and be horrified about when we were younger. But, right, I have another slightly more off the wall question here from Helen. In Pestilence Reigns, there was a character she referred to as the T-Man. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah. So without wanting to go too much into it, I suppose the TMan. She doesn't remember his name because his name's a bit weird. I can't even remember where the name came from. I think it was something suggested by one of my friends. There's a guy called Still Go Furlonger.
That's right. It was a while ago I read Pestilence Reigns.
Yeah, it's so he was just kind of put in as a kind of a nod towards obviously, like you say, the whole I wouldn't say it's mirroring exactly what's happening at this point in time, but there's a lot of crazy going on at the minute, and it was kind of to show that in a situation where the shit hits the fan, it's not just the people who've got their heads together and know what they're doing that have got the chance to survive. It's also the less mentally affluent people, shall we say, who's
yes, indeed,
they stand just as much of a chance as surviving as the saying, I suppose. And that was just a character I just kind of put in just to show, well, hey, not everyone who's going to make it through is going to be 100% compass mentis necessarily. And I know the character itself, there's quite a few people who have said that that's a character that they kind of remember and it stands out in them. And I'd like to think that's because it has, in a world that's gone crazy, it's that little piece of even more insanity that makes you realize that you cannot just trust everyone and take everyone at the I can't think of the words, that just the way that you see them isn't necessarily the way that they actually are.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that, because I mean, a lot of people that would have been referred to as crazy a number of years ago, now you give them a second glance and you think, hang on, actually these people, they may not be quite so crazy as we, well, not we, but as society deems them to be.
Yeah.
But okay, I'm moving on. I'm glancing down at my list I wrote down, and now we have what I would class as a very serious question.
All right.
This is from Lee again.
Right.
If you could be any fictional character, past or present, which Teletubby would you be?
Right.
Now we're hitting the serious questions.
This is one of those things that belongs on like question time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Teletubbies. I mean,
can't say, I'm too familiar with them, not having children myself.
Yeah, I think from a prepper's point of view, I think everyone would expect to go with Tinky Winky because he's got a little handbag. But I'm going to go with I think I'm going to go with Dipsy, because if I'm remembering rightly, he's the green one, and he's got a big ass hat that looks like he stole it off Jamiroquai. So
Right.
who doesn't want a hat like that? Leopard
Right.
skin. I think it's zebra print. Actually, I think a zebra print, huge top hat. Um, that may be just demonstrating too much knowledge about Teletubbies, but
Yeah. No, I'm fully prepared to accept these answers because my knowledge of Teletubbies is not great. You know, I
right.
think there was one with a triangle on his head, and was
Yeah.
there not?
I don't know which one's which. I just remember the green one, big top hat. That's what I want. That's who I want to be. The guy in the hat.
Right. Now, I have actually got some sort of semi-serious questions regarding your books,
Okay.
and I'm sorry to lower the tone and actually talk about proper things,
Yeah, yeah.
but now I have noticed in your books you do tend to involve the military a
Yeah.
lot,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily portrayed in a positive light, but they do feature heavily in your books. I mean, is this based on any experience or just research?
It's not based on experience. It's well, there is research involved in it. But I don't think it's not. I suppose it's not what I would class as hard military fiction, which I know there is a big market for that. Where it's, I suppose, they're normally written by the people who do have the experience. They've had the service. They've actually been in the service themselves.
Yeah.
It's not something I've actually had experience with. But I think going back to what obviously, like I say, what I've read and what's influenced, I suppose, in the past. And I did mention the film before, Aliens, which I suppose it was kind of, I suppose, a nod to that in what James Cameron did in that one was he had the military, he had the armed forces that were so confident in what they could do. And how they could cope with these given, like with this scenario.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's from 1986, so I don't feel like I'm giving away too many spoilers now when I say it didn't pan out for them.
No.
They had all this technology and the confidence that they thought they were going to have, and it went against them. And I think that's kind of went against it in that's kind of what's happened when I've been writing. I suppose it's the concept that no matter how prepared or how effective or how well equipped the forces are, eventually it's
And the shit hits the fan.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can't account for every scenario.
Yeah, you can plan and you can plan, but
Yeah.
the best made plans. Another thing I've noticed, having read Pestilence Reigns, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and Arachnocide, and obviously, having done a bit of beta reading on War Ravages,
Yep.
You do tend to write very strong characters that initially I find that the reading public might take a dislike to, but then they turn out to be unlikely heroes. And I mean, do you draw on any personal experience for this, or
I
I
don't.
mean, they almost seem to go through a very quick redemption arc. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I know when it came to Pestilence Reigns, the whole story and evolution behind that it is something that I started writing off and on when I was 16 years old, which is
Right.
several years ago, maybe it's 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know. But
Hey, I'm 50 next year. There's no shame here.
well, I may have just turned 40, so it's definitely more than 3 years. But that, because I started writing it in school again, like I mentioned before, you write with who you know and what you know and where you know until, I mean, when I was 16 years old, a lot of people watching this may find it hard to believe, but the internet wasn't really the internet back then.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah. So the
As
whole, sorry, I was going to say the whole research, it was done in libraries. And if you couldn't get a book on it, you didn't mention it because you weren't going to get it right. And even then, even with the internet, you don't always get it right because everything's pieced together by different people with different opinions and different experience and things like that. But that's when I started with Pestilence. It was there was a couple of different people who were based on who I know. But then as the book developed, it's had about 7, 8, maybe it's even 9 rewrites, like full rewrites in the time I've worked on it. It originally started off in a first person narrative, which then changed it within maybe it's about 10 years or so. I think I started to approach it from a different point of view, and I was like, if I can write a short story about it, I can use that as a springboard, perhaps, because once I have a short story published, it should be, or it may be easier for us to do things like get a literary agent or get someone to notice us because I then have something published. This was all, it was all before anything like the self-publishing options in like Amazon and all the other websites was actually out there. It was, I think, the same as being a graphic designer, which is one of the jobs I used to have. You couldn't get a job as a graphic designer until you had experience as a graphic designer.
Yeah.
The only way to get the experience was to have the job doing it. So it was the catch-22. And I think when I was looking into it at the time, it was the same with it was very much the same with publishing, where you don't get you needed to have the agent to get a deal, but then you don't get the deal without the agent. So it was a very much of a different approach back then. So I'd brought about the idea of having the short story, which I could use to spring the rest of the book off, and the short story turned into a complete full rewrite of the entire thing. So I think that's the thing that I do struggle with, I think, is because I had the story, and as I started to write the beginning of it, it just kind of evolved straight into the story. And then I took everything that I'd had already and expanded on even further. So the characters that were people at the beginning of the original draft, 15 years later, they were completely different characters.
But I mean, I have recommended Pestilence Reigns on a number of occasions, purely because on various groups on the internet, Facebook, whatever, people have asked for books, where the action kicks in straight away. And for me, that's Pestilence Reigns. You're in for a ride immediately. But I always imagine writing a book, not that I've ever done it, but I mean, I have been involved in process of, helping out authors and editing and beta reading and what have you. It's quite a sort of organic and almost evolutionary process as the book, goes on.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the best things about when I decided to rewrite it and take it from the first person narrative to the third. It was a lot easier to explain the development of the other characters and how they then changed. I'm trying to think. I mean, is there any specific characters that you were thinking about? I know.
Not really. Not any individual characters. I mean, I obviously War Ravages hasn't been published yet, so I can't really say a great deal about that. But no, but I just found that in general, that you do tend to write characters that initially you might think, oh, he's a bit of a wrong'un, and then they turn out actually they almost having a moment of epiphany, I would
Yeah.
guess, and
Yeah.
turn out to be the good, not necessarily the good guys. They've always still got that edge about them,
Yeah.
but no, I do appreciate your characters.
Yeah. I
Um,
think with Pestilence, I think one of the guys potentially would have been Al,
yeah,
the big marine, and he does start off, I suppose, quite overly aggressive, and I think he's probably pissed off with how he's in the situation in the first place. But I know that he does go through a bit of a transition, and he does change, and
yeah. I mean, how he keeps his buddy locked up in the room, and
yeah, uh-huh.
after he's turned, and he does he does sort of go through a cycle, and um, I mean, one thing I must ask: do these big Bailey command units, are they a real thing?
Not that I know of.
All right, okay.
So
I know nothing of the military.
I think the basic gist of those now this is going off topic, but that's the beauty of actually having an actual interaction
Yeah,
someone about it is the Bailey command unit, and this is without a word of a lie. When I was really young, and I'm probably talking about 7, 8 years old. Again, it all stems back to when I was a kid. I just used to have a dream that of basically living in me hometown, but instead of a house, I had this big multi-part vehicle, and like I said,
yeah,
so it's a complete flight of fantasy, and it had it was up on really tall legs with wheels on, so that's not really good stability in the first place.
but weapons everywhere.
Yeah, it had wings. I believe it also had a cage compartment in the back for all me different dinosaurs. I've got to go on record here and say that there's no dinosaurs in Pestilence Raids.
No, there
So
isn't.
there's no cages with dinosaurs. I might
There
use,
are dogs.
yeah, but so it was this thing I had in my mind ever since as a kid, is basically like this huge multi-part vehicle. I suppose it's probably described as like a camper van on steroids, I suppose.
Yeah,
And it was
but for
just
me, it is the ultimate vehicle for any form of apocalypse. And I'm kind of disappointed it doesn't exist in the real world, but
well,
it exists in my head and your head, so that's good enough for me.
yeah. I mean, like I say, there might be somebody working on it somewhere. But it was like it was just like, obviously I think it's more or less described as like a huge, like an 18-wheeler with like it's got the driver's section at the front, it's got the living section in the middle, and then it's got all the weapons in the back.
Yeah,
It was obviously put together from the mind of an 8-year-old,
yeah,
to then
but it
become
works.
into this like zombie apocalypse world. I think it was just them trying to be prepared. Obviously, it is in the first one, and it's probably, I don't know. It does appear in the second one as well. I'll go
Yeah,
online and say that now. It does make a reappearance. Um, I think that the main reason it made the reappearance is just to kind of make sure it's all keeping in line. Uh,
yeah,
I mean, obviously, Seamus has talked about the sequel there, the War of Ravages, which is in Edinton, so we'll see how long that takes. But that had it happens roughly at the same time elsewhere, so it was just making sure that the technology and the stuff that they have in one area is still also available in the other. So I just thought that the best way to do that is to make sure that the Bailey command unit appears in there, and
yeah. No, it does have a definite synchronicity for sure. And that as soon as that book gets released, the better. But I appreciate the process it has to go through, and but anyway, moving on from sort of right, it's well known that you like your metal, don't you? Music wise,
I'm,
you do
I'm
like your metal.
I'm
and
partial. Yes. Uh-huh.
you are partial.
Yeah.
What this is one of my questions, obviously, which is why it's a bit random. What would be your ultimate song to write to? You know, if I mean, are we talking Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Slayer? You know, if you were lacking in inspiration and you needed to put one song on or one album on to get the creative juices flowing, what would it be?
I think
I
that
know.
it probably depends on where I'm up to in a book. If it's coming up to some type of big fight scene where you've got, I don't know, like hundreds of zombies running at you and you've got 7 bullets left and a penknife, it's
Yeah,
down the wire. It's got to be something, I suppose, like fast and heavy. So you're right. You've got the likes of Motorhead for that. Um, if it's something a little bit more dark and moody and a bit more gothic-y, then I suppose I've got like the likes of Marilyn Manson. He can be a bit gothic, I suppose,
yeah.
and then if it's the occasions where it's a bit of a relationship happening, then I always go back to Meatloaf. You know, you cannot do wrong with that guy.
No, no, no. I'm no stranger to heavy metal. You know,
Yeah,
punk has been my mainstay, but I cut my teeth on metal,
yeah,
and you know, so I do appreciate the raw energy behind it. And uh, having read a couple of shorts of yours, I honestly do think you should delve into the horror genre more often. And I'm not necessarily right at this moment, but in the future, because I personally I find British horror is a genre that's, well, it's almost disappeared. You know, I mean, there are still a few around. I mean, I grew up with Graham Masterton, James Herbert, and British horror writers. You know, there aren't many around
yeah.
anymore, and the few shorts I have read of yours um, took me right back there. And I would say it's definitely another avenue to explore.
Yeah.
It probably won't sell any books apart from maybe me, but you know,
Yeah,
but
I mean, yeah, you're right. I know, obviously, I know that you have. Well, obviously, I know what you've read of mine because I'm the one that gives you it. But yeah,
yeah,
I know. You've mentioned it before in the past, and it's because I'm kind of waiting for more ravages to come back from the current phase of editing. I didn't want to start working on the
yeah,
next book straight away in case it comes back from me guy and he says, "Why have you ended it here? It's crap. Put more in." So I didn't want to start the next one because it's going to continue more or less straight on from it.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
didn't want to start it for them to find out that it needs to go in a different direction. So I have kind of stepped back. I've done a couple of I've started working on the short stories again, like you mentioned. Uh,
yeah.
I'm actually working on a one at the minute, which is a little bit close to home for you. Not quite Doncaster, but it is in Hull because you know
Right,
if you're going
close
to have
enough.
if you're going to have a horror story, where better than Hull?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I'm kind of working on that one at the minute. Obviously, when I've got that bundled up and sorted out, I'll be able to get that shipped off to a bit editing. Obviously, yourself included for that one. But I know, yeah, you've mentioned there. I've got a few different shorts. I've always thought about compiling them together into into like an anthology. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, I think the fact that, shameless plug, the fact that this one was done,
yeah,
science fiction, which is different to that one, which is
yep.
horror and massive.
It's big.
It is.
That that kept me going through the whole summer of 2019.
Well, I mean, that's just it. And obviously, it would have been ideal if I got the next one out for this summer because it would have been an ideal summer to have it out for this as well because you kind of get anywhere. But the fact that I did a horror zombie one and then I kind of went on to a science fiction one before going back to the zombie one, and then hopefully what I'm going to be able to cover in the different shorts is going to show that I can do a variety of different things. I mean, I'm not going to say that this time next year I'm going to be a romance net writer
I
or
hope not.
have a large number of various dark fantasy erotica under my belt.
Yeah,
I mean, never
I'll
say
give them a miss if that's okay.
never say never, but I can't see us stepping away from it's what I know and it's what I've wrote since I suppose the age of 8, science fiction, bit fantasy horror, and then like you say, trying to keep I suppose focus more on the horror side of things, get those shorts pulled together, and see about getting them put out there.
Yeah, no, because I do think that, and this is no disrespect to writers from other countries, America, whatever, but British horror has always had a unique place in my heart, and there's not a great deal of it around anymore. And like I said, it could just be me that would be the only person that would read it, or who knows. But keep up the good work, and I think we've probably done our time now, haven't we?
I think we've done.
I've gone through a whole large bottle of Stella whilst I'm doing this, and it's gone 5 o'clock, so the cat needs feeding. So nice one.
That's great. Thanks very much.